Welcome to Beyond the Here and Now. I'm your host, Antonia Lau, and this is the show that will take you a moment to wrap your heads around new thought, new thinking, new ideologies than you've been taught to think and to believe about yourself, the world around you, and your place in it. Today's topic, we're going to discuss the 20th century's most prolific psychic, Edgar Cayce. Now, it's interesting because we see little snippets here and there. We hear little things we think superficially in the news about the man. But I want to share how this came to me so you understand. Now, yes, my background is rich in my studies of spirituality, metaphysics. It was quite deep and extensive by the time I was in my early 20s. It comes from my own childhood. I used to read a book a week. Now it's 5 at a time. But what ends up happening is it was important because I was a psychic child and raised in an academic family. The family wouldn't discuss this subject matter whatsoever. So by 9, I was pulling my own adult books off the shelves in the library with my library card. It was the best way to do this. But I continued to be guided in that study, and I'd studied everything from Eastern religions to the origin of religions to everything I could get my hands on in the subject matter of spirituality and metaphysics, parapsychology, ESP, Uri Geller, everything I could get my hands on, and put those into private practice on my own. So it was interesting, at the time I was in my early 20s, I was now all of a sudden using my psychic work for the benefit of the lives of others as a professional psychic. And I mean that in the sense, professional psychic is quite different from storefront gypsy. But I was doing it with a special connection to the divine universe, to do so for the benefit of their lives and greater soul growth. But yet I had all this body of information, and I think it's not good enough just to be psychic. We must continue to learn, to grow, to be guided, and to study the material. And so I would always continue that. Now, it's interesting because one of my jobs in California, one of the workplaces, brilliant people, and we would, come together at coffee break, and one was a seminary student. And I remember her very well. And she loved God and the divine universe, and so did I, but in quite a different way. And I thought we had that in common, so a like-mindedness. Well, one day she heard that for the upper management staff, I was giving psychic readings. So she came in one morning, steaming with anger, off the elevators, and I'm sitting there, and at that time I was doing reception. And it was interesting, we would get about 1,000 calls a day, and in the intermittent time I would read and study. Well, she came in, I would come in early, and then she came in early, and she just blasted me angrily because she had found out the day before. She says, "How dare you? This is a God-given gift. You're using it this way. People will only use you for that talent, that gift. That's not the way it's supposed to be done." And I looked, and she went on to me about 10 to 15 minutes at the top of her lungs with people getting off the elevator. So it was, shock. I'd never seen anybody react that way so harshly, and especially in a public, circumstance that way. So that day it got me thinking. I thought, oh my God. I went to the ladies' room for my break. I thought, if this is not the right direction to use, please show me. But I believe I was guided in this direction. Please give me more detail. But what the heck happened today? So, like I said, that was interesting because that night I couldn't get it out of my head on the way home. I thought, well, maybe let me grab the little community paper. There's an astrology section. Perhaps it's, an astrological aspect that hit today. What is going on? And the gentleman that usually did the column was off on vacation. And they had another piece there, a book that he'd written by Robert G. Temple called The Serious Mystery, Dr. Robert G. Temple. And so I thought, wow, and he talked about how this tribe in Africa had known about this constellation and that scientists had not realized since till 1976. I thought, yes. And they'd known, and they taught this level of awareness of 5 dimensions, 4 levels of initiation, and then you were carefully initiated into the 5th dimensional level that they had been taught by beings from other planets, other places. And I thought, wow, that's nice. But I couldn't get out of my mind how harsh she was. So I couldn't sleep that night. I thought, geez, I need to know, is this the right direction? This is the way it should be utilized. I'm doing it in the highest ways for others. And all of a sudden, on the side of the bed, on the right-hand side, was a gentleman, bald, with glasses, hands folded in front of his, standing, hands folded in front of him, down, but he had on a blue or navy blue suit. And he said, the A.R.E needs you. And I thought, oh my God. And I started to do all these protections. I thought all that I had learned in my studies, white light to protect, red roses, all those things. And then I heard a chorus of voices say, now, Antonia, would we ever bring anything negative around you? Calm down. And I thought, I felt kind of stupid then. I thought, okay. And then on the left side of my bed was a gentleman in a kimono with a head or a bandana with the rising sun from Japan. And he had a bouquet of flowers, a big grin, and they were for me. And he was just grinning and he didn't speak. And the gentleman on the right in the suit kept saying, the A.R.E needs you. I said, okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. I just want to get some sleep. Okay, thank you. And finally I thought, geez, I just want to get some sleep. And all of a sudden I was able to sleep. But during the night, they had showed me that all souls come at their own time, in their own way, to their own understanding of the levels of the universe that they're prepared for at the time that they're prepared. They all of a sudden show me the girl that had lambasted me that morning in front of the Washington Monument, the obelisk in Washington, D.C. And they said, you see, she only sees truth from the first level. They said, but Antonia, you know there is truth from the second, third, and fourth level, or fourth dimensional levels. And they said, and soon, Antonia, you will see as we do from the fifth level or fifth dimension. And they raised me so I could see. I was above the Washington Monument. I could see all four sides, and she was down on the first side. And they said, understand, all in their own time. And I thought, wow, that's very interesting. And so sure, they showed me, they said, as a man is on a canoe and along a river trail, at night, he doesn't see that there's a town or a village around the bend. They put me in the back of the canoe. I was on this river. And they said, but Antonia, and they raised me above that river. They said, around the banks, you can see that there's lights for a town and a village. They said, that is how all will see in their own time, in their own way. And then just before I woke that morning, they showed me on a raft, and there was a little banners on either side in a different language I didn't understand, little blue letters, and I had on a blue like toga, flat raft. And then I saw this huge body of water like the ocean. I was going at a quick pace, and there I saw the other girl in her raft, different color, different toga, it was orange, different banners on her raft. And she saw me, and we both saw each other, and we smiled and waved, and I waved as hers went into the distance, and mine was going fast forward. And I heard again, all will be well, all in their own time. Well, I woke up, got ready for work that next day, thinking, wow, what a strange experience that night. And I would always arrive early to work, probably somewhere between 45 minutes to an hour early, just to settle into the day. The calls would come at a fast pace, and I wanted to be settled for that day. So I got in there about 7 or so, 7:15, 7:30. And all of a sudden, another female that would come early, another secretary from one of the presidents would come, and she said, Antonia, she got off the elevator. She said, I know, Arnon and I just moved, and we found this in the mail, but I know you're into that meditation and stuff, and I thought you might enjoy this. And she said, this came from the previous tenant. You can scratch the name out if you want. She laid it on the desk, and I screamed at the top of my lungs in the upper left-hand corner of the return address. It was from the A.R.E, and it was a trial membership. I had never even heard of the A.R.E, never even heard of none of this. It was amazing. Even in all my studies, I'd never gone in that direction. I screamed. I said, do you have a stamp? She said, well, yes. She went and got it. I said, you're witnessing. I scratched out his name, put my name. You're witnessing as I drop it into the mail chute. I couldn't believe it. I thought, what in the world? How can this be that within 24 hours this has happened? Well, by noon at my lunch break, I would think we had 45 minutes, my first book was now finished. And I couldn't sit there for the rest of the afternoon in between calls and not take in new data, new information. It's just something I have a hard time doing. Sure enough, I ran out for lunch to go to the bookstore to get something. And all the sections I looked at the bookstore, very quickly, nothing. And I had to get back to punch in on time. So all of a sudden, there was only one way out, a turnstile just past the cashier, and something made me look up to the top shelf behind the cashier, and there was the book, The Serious Mystery by Robert G. Temple. And I thought, no, it was even in the wrong section. It was into the geography tag. And I said, please. And he put it on. I ran in, punched in right on time, slammed the book to the desk as I set up for the afternoon, and it opened to a picture of something from that tribe that they had investigated, the author of that particular book. And it was a 4 obelisk and the 5th of the 5th dimension of truth and awareness and understanding that they had been given from these divine beings that they had been visited with for thousands of years prior to scientists knowing that that constellation even existed. Now we know that Sirius A and Sirius B exist. This is interesting because it comes to mind because I am such a hard and fast skeptic. Those in the show know I have to have proof. I can't just study and look at everything. I want to have confirmation from the universe and from all sorts in the highest ways possible. So sure enough, I ended up reading. I thought, let me just prove this guy, whoever this Edgar Cayce is. That was my first thought. Pulled the first book. Second, some 20-some books later, I was caught in every detail he said. He confirmed everything I had studied, cleared up all the misconceptions that they had wrong with greater detail than any of the studies I'd ever been through before. And I was in awe. And the first few pages, it would take a couple of minutes to get your head around the language of the readings that were cited. But after the first chapter, I could blow right through the books. And now, several years later, many, many books later, and much rich study later, since the early 80s, on the work of Edgar Cayce, it is my joy and actually my honor to present to you today my guest. And I have to tell you, in all the things that I've ever read and seen, it is amazing and unusual. And I would love to introduce you today to the best-selling author as well as award-winning historical filmmaker or documentary filmmaker, Sidney Kirkpatrick. How are you, Sidney? Thank you for being with us today.
A lovely introduction.
Sidney, it's a wonderful to see you. You yourself, I believe, came through the Cayce data and information in a rather unusual way through your wife, Nancy.
Yeah, well, she wasn't my wife at the time.
Okay.
and that's how I guess you get led into such things, you know, good learning experiences, because, you know, she was raised, but she was a dedicated follower of Cayce ever since she was in high school.
Yes.
And just steadfast. Father got cancer. She was using Cayce treatments. You know, she was just steadfast. And I was just such a skeptic. I thought he was a fraud. And, you know, I thought anybody who put their faith in a psychic ought to visit a psychiatrist. So we started dating, and it was just like we were, it was just like this tug of war over this Cayce business. And I kept trying to ignore it. And, you know, I guess it is so many synchronicities. We were actually ghostwriting a book, and we were visiting Gerald Ford in Washington, D.C. And we were on the same plane together, and we just started up this argument again about Edgar Cayce, and just went back and forth like this. And so we decided we would put an end to it by visiting Virginia Beach, which is, as you know, the sort of headquarters for the Cayce world.
Yes.
Where he lived for most of his life, this great library. And I was going to go into this library and prove to Nancy the error of her ways. That if you picked one of these so-called psychic readings and you really examined it hard, it would just unravel, and that the stories told about him had been enhanced over the years. And, you know, as a professional writer, as a biographer, I know how stories get embellished, embroidered, and so I thought that was just the same case with Cayce. And so I went in thinking that this was, you know, I would prove to her the error of her ways in a very short, you know, in a few hours. And 2 weeks later, I was, you know, I just couldn't do it. And 3 weeks later, and then 4 weeks, and then so we started doing, you know, doing research, which eventually led into a book. But I think what was so special about it, and I think what the universe had in mind, was we were such polar opposites in that regard. I was such a skeptic and she was such a steadfast believer that when we went into something, we'd always argue about it, and then we had this thing going on back and forth. But we saw different sides of it in a way that alone we couldn't have. And, you know, just essentially we bought a motorhome and just spent about the next 5 years off and on driving and staying in every place Edgar Cayce lived and worked, and visiting with people who had readings. And of course, you know, at the end of it, I became the believer. It's like well, as you know so well yourself, it's like jumping down a rabbit hole, and it goes in so many directions. And as you know, in such a personal way, having gifts like that don't make for an easy life.
Correct.
It certainly wasn't for Edgar.
What I love about your book, and for the audience to recognize, it's called Edgar Cayce, the American Prophet. And what is interesting is by Sidney Kirkpatrick. What is interesting, and I'm going to show them or share, let's see if we can share the screen for them to see the title of the book. What is interesting, I want them to recognize or to realize, is that there are no mistakes in the universe. And I think you're seeing the book here, Edgar Cayce, An American Prophet, Sidney D. Kirkpatrick, and they can find that at their bookstores and on Amazon, of course, now during the lockdown. But it's important that they understand. I have read so much about the Cayce material, but your book was phenomenal. It pulled back all the shades that we had been used to from the other material that was done around the 30s by Thomas Segru with There Is a River, which I'd read long years ago. But your book went into such depth. We got to see the man, his journeys, his pain, all the hardship that he went through. People don't recognize he was born in 1877, yes, but he came through World War I. He came through the Great Depression. He came through World War II, and everything sundry in between. The Spanish flu epidemic, we are going through the so-called epidemic at this time. But what I was going to suggest or say is he went through this with a family, lived, and also, as you mentioned, with the consternation that he felt that he had a duty for humankind to deliver this information, but he wasn't always welcomed. But your book goes through a rich wealth of information, not only of the people we interviewed, but you absolutely put the suit on this man. Before it was just an image of this knowledge coming through, this psychic, but you made him human, but yet showed us this example. If we all aspire, we too can have this rich quality of life. If we adhere to the lessons, the legacy of knowledge he left us, it was more than just a couple of readings here and there. He's the most documented psychic with over 14,000 readings. But you said you got locked in the vault with those readings, correct, that were done? And
you know, we've had several sort of synchronicities that really pushed this book forward, pushed the project forward, and you know, ultimately, certainly changed my life in a very serious way. But early on, you know, the Cayce papers, the Cayce books, documents are all preserved in Virginia Beach in the Edgar Cayce Foundation vault. And there was you know, a fun night when Nancy and I were in there, and the security guards and the archivist accidentally locked us in. That was an experience, and you know, the archivist always joked later on that it really was premeditated, that she knew if she didn't lock me in, I was going to bolt, and she wanted a book written.
wow.
You know, the other really, you know, I went through a transition myself while writing the book, and you know, as I said, we were tooling around the country in this motorhome, trying to find people who had readings and studying the material. Just because a document in the Edgar Cayce Foundation vault says a woman was cured of breast cancer, didn't necessarily, for me, prove that that was the case. We wanted to put flesh and blood on the readings.
Yes.
And
Confirmation.
our entry into Anniston, Alabama, for example, was just a classic turning point for me. Anniston, when Cayce lived there in the late 1800s, early, probably around 1904 or 5, he had lost his photography business.
Yes.
He was operating out of a wagon, and he was going from school district to school district, shooting class photos, church group meetings, and his wife was, Gertrude, was back in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, recovering from TB. And so we pulled into Anniston probably around 2 o'clock in the morning into this state park, and just cut the engine and went to bed. And in the morning, we were going to figure out, well, how are we going to research Edgar Cayce in Anniston, Alabama? There wasn't much, documentation, and we knew he was living out of a wagon, and who knows, so anyway, 6 o'clock in the morning, thump, 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 and it was, we're from California, and I thought, earthquake, oh my gosh.
Yes.
The motorhome is shaking like this, and but then it's not California, it's Anniston, Alabama, and they're not known for their earthquakes. And so I just jumped out of bed in my skivvies and ran outside to see what was. And there was this thin boy, and he looked extremely tall and thin, and he was bouncing a basketball off the back of the RV.
Yes.
And it was shaking the whole RV, and I looked at him like, what the hell,
Yeah.
And he looked at me like he was as shocked and surprised to see me as I saw him. And he just took off with his basketball, just took off. And anyway, it's 6:10 in the morning or something like that. We're all up, and we don't want to pull out all the camp gear.
Right.
And so we decided we're just going to walk right into town and find a place to eat and discuss how we're going to tackle Edgar Cayce in Anniston, Alabama. No records to speak of. We didn't have, usually when you go into a place to research Edgar Cayce, it's relatively easy because he was deeply connected with the church.
Yes.
So you could get church records. And he was in like Selma, Alabama, he was the church secretary. So you have hundreds of pages in his name. And you just go around the country and you have just pockets of material, but nothing for Anniston. So we go into this diner, and it's full of farmers, it's 6 o'clock in the morning, and, cotton farmers, and have to wait in line to find a place and finally get a seat at the counter. And we just, ordered food, I don't know, something like that. And out of the men's room comes this, well, you'd say an old fogey. I mean, he was seriously elderly, and he looked like he was wearing the same suit he was married in 50 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And we're in this is mostly farmers.
Right.
And he's walking out of the men's room and is going, and Edgar Cayce did this. And then he came and he was talking about Edgar Cayce.
Are you serious?
Oh my God. And of course we had to stop and, what's the connection? What are you talking about? And he had just joined the Toastmasters, which is where he teaches public speaking.
Yes.
And as part of your assignments as you climb the ranks of Toastmasters, is you pick a subject that's dear to you that you're going to deliver a talk on. Yeah. That afternoon, he was going to deliver a talk on Edgar Cayce in Anniston, Alabama. And his great aunt, had an Edgar Cayce reading, and he had, studied it, he knew it, and he had spent, 3 or 4 months researching Edgar Cayce and Anniston. So it was really like for me, a skeptic, it was like, oh my God. And, Nancy sort of took it for stride, but for me, it was like I was, suffering PTSD. And sort of that's sort of how it went. And so I really reluctantly became convinced. And when you're, what, as you so accurately stated earlier, Cayce is important because of the documentation.
Correct.
You have psychics who are clearly have shown, spectacular abilities over the years.
Yes.
You could argue who's bigger, who's better or not, but Edgar Cayce is perhaps the best documented
Correct.
psychic, and that's what makes the information that came through so convincing. That and the specificity of his readings,
Oh my goodness.
body parts, blood temperature,
Everything.
And of course today, he's known as the father of holistic health because of the health treatments, which
Yes.
many of which are now state of the art, some of which are still considered fringe, but
Yes.
today it was all radical. Anyway, I rattle on. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I want them to know your building of the story was beautiful because they got the whole feeling of being there. I can't believe the man walked out in his suit ready as an orator. Odd thing is, I just spoke to a friend yesterday who practices from Sri Lanka. She's in the Toastmasters, teaches the speech, and I thought that was interesting coincidence because we don't talk that often, and you're bringing it up today. So we all know in the spiritual metaphysical world, there are no coincidences. There's a purpose, a timeline, like I said, a destiny, and there's a reason for all things to come together. No mistakes in the universe. So I wanted everybody to know that. But those instances, especially because my favorite clients are skeptics and or first timers, because the way they get it, it'll change your mind. And your skepticism matches my own. But to this day, I want proof every day. That's just how I am. There's so much garbage in the world, as you know. We have to, because humans are in this mess that we are today, so to speak, because of this misinformation and misdirection. And what you or I and the work that you've done are trying to help them align. So as we go forward and evolve, we'll be a much better human race than we have beforehand. What's interesting about your work was when I noticed that you even go to describe the detail. He worked with such detail for 20 years. Yes, he did the medical readings. And then, of course, Cayce, when he was around other people, their energies from the Blumenthals on to other people that were into the leadership or the reincarnation, astrology, numerology, all of a sudden, just by being around them in a few days, he could pull in those quality or depth of knowledge. For 20 years, he covered 10,000 topics.
Yeah, I think in my own transition of trying to understand Cayce, like many people, I came into it with certain expectations, and those are inevitably disappointed because Cayce gives treatments for everything from psoriasis to hemorrhoids,
yes,
everything, but it takes work.
Yes,
and so it's not so easily, and you are blessed with the ability to understand the language intuitively in the reading.
yes,
It takes a lot of people difficult time.
yes.
But perhaps the biggest transition, and if I share anything with your audience of my understanding of Cayce, is that he didn't do what he did alone.
Oh, good.
When I first got into this, I think, oh my gosh, look at all these famous people he did readings for, and oh my God, this is Cayce's work. 14,000 readings, and he could do this and he could do that. But in reality, when you start examining it down, drilling down, I guess, into it, you realize that he couldn't do what he did alone. He needed someone to guide him into trance. He needed a stenographer. He needed professionals, physicians to understand the treatments, eventually historians. He needed a team.
Yes.
And we all need teams. And as part of the soul's purpose, why he was, in this particular incarnation, was as a team. And you could look at his life as we eventually came to do it, as assembling the people who would make what he did possible. Mm-hmm. And as we got into sort of trying to understand that in a sort of more multi-dimensional way, I think we began to understand that, yes, he needed all of those people, but most important, he needed someone who genuinely wanted help, who needed help, and would find their way to him. And that the more genuine the question, the more heartfelt the question, the more comprehensive, more compelling came through. So it wasn't just Cayce, it was a meeting of two souls.
Yes.
And ultimately, you could say it was a meeting of a whole bunch of souls. And so that has opened up a whole lot for me.
We learn metaphysically that what happens is even in our energetic or auric fields, we all have them. And I've always said in my work for over 40 years as a metaphysical spiritual teacher as well, I've always said that sometimes when we come around one another, it is literally a trigger or a golden key inside one other's auric energetic field that triggers something for that person. So we all have an interchange, so to speak, with one another. And that's important, that trigger, as Cayce did with some of the people when he had never even discussed reincarnation. And his biblical background as a Christian wouldn't adhere to it. I remember you stated that he said, now how am I going to address this to the Sunday school class? And his beliefs, and the life readings, you even show how they thought that they came through, and Cayce was worried everybody wanted theirs, Gladys and Gertrude. And then Hugh Lynn was coming from college, from university for Christmas. And you stated that they were at the hotel, I think it's in Dayton, Ohio at the time. And they had just enough money for Christmas dinner, but their gift to Hugh Lynn was his life reading. But he had been raised Christian. And they thought, okay, and even Cayce Sr., Edgar Cayce hadn't had his reading yet. And he went and he met, the way you described when his Hugh Lynn reached to hug him, and he felt the newspaper underneath the jacket of the suit that he had stuffed the suit with just to keep warm, because they were threadbare and they had no money to A, leave the hotel, B, let alone to travel back home. But what I like most is when they gave him this beautiful gift, Hugh Lynn absolutely stormed and was upset and angry. How could this possibly, this is garbage. He was really angry. What I love now is, just like you, that heavy skepticism, it finally came to a point of realization that he knew that it was correct and true. And with Hugh Lynn's work for his father, literally this is his dynamic, that teamwork you talked about, to get this information and data out to the rest of the world. So we won't be so misaligned if we use the free will choice. So we keep opening, so we keep growing. I always say on the planet, people don't understand, it's not about news, weather, and sports. That's nice. But we're here for a couple of reasons. For soul growth, number one, to clean up our garbage and our crap we all have and carry, and to leave the world better than when we came. And people don't understand, you're not taking your stuff, you're not taking your titles, your bank accounts, your accolades. I hope Bill Gates realizes that. You're taking how you left the world better for humankind and Earth itself. Both are important. It's something that unfortunately our brothers and sisters in that elite world haven't quite recognized, because Cayce always stayed connected spiritually. He read the Bible for every year of his life, starting I think at 9 years old, from cover to cover, from year to year, every birthday. And so these gifts or talents and abilities, he couldn't even believe when he heard what the readings had said, because remember, people don't realize he was in trance. He didn't hear until he read the stenographer, Gladys Davis Turner's work. And they were shocked as well, and his wife Gertrude. So it was amazing. All those things came up, even to the point where you show how he had to realize that Gladys Davis Turner was actually his twin flame or twin soul. But Gertrude was his soul mate. And then they had asked the guides, well, what are we supposed to do? Is this my wife? Yes, this is the wife you should have. But yes, this is your twin flame. And here she was, out of all the stenographers, they tested, they all left the room except for this one that could take it at how I said, no problem. She could take down the data quickly, fast, knew how to do it, and she preserved those works for the rest of humanity. So it's almost, as you said, this team, goosebumps as I'm talking about it, that
Well,
collective.
yeah, and the team, stretches through many incarnations of people coming together to work together. One of the most moving readings, I think, to my mind, that Cayce gave was very late in his life. And he was turning inward and he was examining his childhood, his youth, and he had manifested all kinds of unusual behaviors as a child. One of which was what the family called his imaginary friends, people he spoke to, communicated with, and unlike many children with imaginary friends, these had first and last names. And anyway, he, as an older man, right before he died, he asked in trance about himself, and he said, was I imagining all of that as a child? And what were these things that were happening to me? And the source, who or what,
Yes.
in case he says, well, no, you weren't. And you were seeing souls, spirits who were your guides, who were going to be with you your whole life. And those children, those playmates, were souls that appeared to you as playmates, because that's the only way as you as a child could understand their love, their companionship. Another subject, right, he examined as a child was the nature of prayer.
Mm-hmm.
This moved me very much. As a young child, 5 or 6 years old, his little brother had died. And there had been a row between his mother and father, and his father was alcoholic and abusive and left the mother. And he was alone with his mother for a period of time in this cabin that they lived in the tobacco fields. And, it was a dirt floor, kitchen, dirt floor, and he had never seen his mother upset cry before.
Mm.
If you're married to an alcoholic, you often have certainly in those years, very stoic.
Yes.
You hold it in, you have to hold it in. Yes. For your family.
That's correct.
And she was holding it in, and they were alone in this cabin, and relatives would drop food off the porch, but she wouldn't leave. And she was grieving, and she suddenly started crying. She just broke down. Edgar had never seen his mother cry before. So it stuck in his mind, and she collapsed on the floor, this dirt floor, and rolled up into like an embryo, and she was hysterically crying. And then she got up on her knees and she took Edgar by his shoulders and pulled him down to her, and they started praying together. And she put her hands over his. He had mentioned how dedicated Cayce was to reading the Bible, and he was, but at this point, he had never been to church. He had never seen prayer. Mm. His father wouldn't allow it. Mm. And here they were, shoulder to shoulder praying. She had her hands around his, and he had what he didn't understand was an audio hallucination or a psychic experience through his hearing. And what he heard when he was praying with his mother, who was in tears like that, was he heard his uncle's violin. He heard a single note. And he remembered that as music. Two people praying together could create music. And that was something he carried throughout the rest of his life. Just like you were looking at me, perhaps you're seeing my aura.
Yes, exactly.
You have that gift.
Yes.
And so you have to sort of break loose, and that was a challenge for me, breaking loose of the sort of narrow confines of what our own abilities are. And Edgar, as a child, was seeing love, prayer, two people together like that as creating harmony, a beauty. And throughout the rest of his life, he came to understand what prayer was in a church, outside of a church, people together. And
Mm.
that again feeds back into Edgar Cayce didn't do what he did alone. He needed
Yes.
people. He needed someone. He was there for a purpose. And it was a mingling of spirits or something. I don't know.
It's the point is people realize or should realize that we don't live in this world alone. And it is through this connection to one another that we build the quality of the world, or this collective consciousness, if you want to call it. But we raise the whole evolutionary level of humankind if we'll but pay attention. And I understand things aren't always so easy, but we asked to be born exactly at this time of great change. Um, all these beautiful examples that you show us in the book, The American Prophet, as well as you have the other book, True Tales, based on Cayce's works as well. All these help us to see, again, in humankind, how one particular human can make this domino effect, I like to call it, between them and the rest of the world that impacts all of us. And that's what we're all supposed to be doing. This misdirection we've had is a problem, but we asked to come at this time, and that we would be guided, if we so choose, in our own time, in our own way, to open to that awareness, that understanding, so we could grow. But the point is, we're supposed to inspire. As you know, you've seen, you didn't listen to Nancy. You didn't believe. So each person has to open, as even Cayce states, at their own time and in their own way, when it's best for them. So I learned long ago that everybody is where they're meant to be at exactly that time. You don't need to force them or push it. They will come, and which is what they showed me in that dream that very night in early 1980, 81. And I remember, oh, in her own time, whoever, the girl was at that day, she will open and own that information. So it's tough on 7.7 billion of us, but at this point we promise to come. And the more and more we grow, every time we walk by someone, they're triggered, believe it or not, especially now at this time of the world's evolution, humankind evolution, within 6 feet. I thought that was interesting that they have us 6 feet apart for social distancing, but they don't recognize or realize that spiritual portion. We really affect one another on all levels past that 6 feet physical parameter. We're reaching into each other's souls, minds, hearts, and there's an energy that passes every time we walk past someone. They haven't quite gotten that lesson. We hope for them that they do. But they're human, therefore flawed. So we want to realize that all of our brothers and sisters, I say everybody we see at Christmas at Walmart has to make it. It's a big job. And those of us that are open to the awareness, doesn't mean you're better. No one person is better than anyone, just different. But we promise to continue the growth. It doesn't stop. Continue the study and the application to improve. I mean, we've got a long way to go, even to be near Cayce or any of our mentors, Jesus, Krishna, Buddha, Muhammad, Moses. We're nowhere close to any of them. So we have a long evolutionary journey ahead. But we look and we recognize we've been given this help. We should also inspire or give those same sort of qualities by inspiration only, because people aren't going to listen, really. But what happens is, but they see us act a certain way or do a certain tense or attitude or belief or an intention even, and they will be inspired perhaps to do the same. And that's how it matriculates through the population. So that's the sad part that people don't recognize. So even though they have us so-called sequestered, it's still happening, because those energy beams go farther than Wi-Fi ever would. And what ends up happening is, on a soul level, we meet with one another. The people don't recognize or haven't been allowed to recognize that that soul is, we have one soul that lives forever. And like you said, we keep getting in these teams, soul tribes, cute groups to kind of trigger everyone to this greater knowledge. And at some point, we'll have a better humankind. Cayce talks about this period coming forward between 58 and 98, people remark, but he stated when we were spiritually aware. And if we notice, from 58, we had all of a sudden the insurgence of people in the New Thought, and everybody from the great philosophers of the time, all of a sudden it's open to the hippies that open their thoughts to new ideologies outside, Eastern religions, to 98, where everybody's doing yoga. So it's kind of an interesting thing. So we did make that big jump from his time of being here and being prolific in his work until he passed in 1945. But we did make that jump, so now we're ready. And so people have to recognize, I hope, that they not only continue to clean up and gain that soul growth, Sydney, I hope that they recognize that they still have to grow. They still have to spread it. It's no good if we have the information unless we share it. And so you talked about that sharing. You're getting ready to share for a conference, our A.R.E conference coming up in Virginia Beach. But this year we have a little few constraints to deal with. The constraints being we are not allowed to have this social connection or contact. So you and Nancy will be fielding a lot of, I guess, speakers, and those speakers are?
Yeah, well, we're keynote speakers at the Edgar Cayce Congress, which is held every year, and it's for students of the Cayce work. It's just like a wonderful experience because you come together, and it's relatively inexpensive. I mean, it's not set up to make money. It's set up so that students of Edgar Cayce can get to know each other and discuss things.
Yes.
So Nancy and I love it very much, but this year, of course, because of Corona, we're all going to be doing it remotely. In years past, Nancy and I have brought guests, people who had Edgar Cayce readings, who knew Edgar Cayce. So we've had famous people, we've had infamous people, but it's a wonderful sharing, and we will hope to have a surprise guest. But because of the Corona, we're just not sure how it's all going to shake out.
In the book, you show us and share with us the fact that even Cayce had gone to Washington. We'll never know what those readings are. They were kept from us, but
we have a lot of famous people readings. I mean, we know Nikola Tesla had readings. Yes. We know Thomas Edison had readings. Woodrow Wilson, Charles Lindbergh. I mean, we had a lot of important people. One of the things, we wrote books earlier on. We edited the Edgar Cayce magazine, Venture Inward, for a while.
Yes.
And what we've now really dedicated ourselves to doing is sort of understanding the influence, impact, the reverberations of Cayce and his work, which we can understand in ways we didn't understand before.
Yes.
For example, a reading Cayce gave for a girl. As you put flesh and blood and you start understanding who she was the daughter of the head of Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. And you see an effect take place. Irene Seiberling is getting readings to help her brother who's alcoholic. And Irene Seiberling is a woman who brings Bill Wilson together to create Alcoholics Anonymous.
Oh, wow.
And Irene Seiberling's husband, who's initially very skeptical about this, is a banker, starts getting interested in politics, and he asks Edgar Cayce, well, who would make the best presidential candidate? And Edgar Cayce gives the answer, and it's just absolutely fascinating. But you see all of these jumps one after the other, and you see this presidential candidate, Burton Wheeler, running against FDR, and this is one of those readings that everybody said Cayce got wrong, because the reading said, will Burton Wheeler become president? Cayce in trance comes back and says, yes, if he wants it.
Oh.
And since he was running for president, so many of the readings where we think Cayce was wrong back in the day have proven correct. With I'm sorry for this tangent, but
That's
there
good.
Does pay off, being open to the public to read, and he was offered the vice presidency, and he turned it down because he was a pacifist.
Exactly.
And he taken that he would have become, president because FDR died.
Yes.
In office, and whose finger would have been on the atomic war button,
Exactly.
on the bomb? It wouldn't have been Truman. It would have been Burton Wheeler, a pacifist. So it'd be interesting to, you speculate. Yeah.
But it's always his free will choice. And that's what Cayce had stated in that reading. And so he knew exactly. This is those beautiful things, that those layers of knowledge that you've given us that were so magnificent. You went deep with your connection. And I'm sure you were guided by Cayce during this time to bring this data out. Today, this time period Cayce discusses as well as astrologically, we can find that the veil is being pulled away. So we can see all the machinations that have been behind in our governments and our life and our belief systems. So that veil is now that we can see, we will never allow that to be recreated on the planet again. But without this veil coming down, we would never know these things. I believe you mentioned that the FBI had a file on him, as well as, I guess, the CIA when they started. So they knew that there was credibility here, and they tried to, all kinds of ways from, subterfuge to, like I said, practicing medicine without, a license, all that garbage.
He was arrested twice.
Exactly. So all through that, this man went through all through the denigration. He went through all the suffering monetarily, financially, his dream coming of the hospital. And then all of a sudden, 2 years later, it's pulled all the way, like I said, and I mentioned earlier, all those world events he covered, and he still left a legacy for us. It's to tell us, no matter what circumstance we're in, no matter how hard it gets, to continue. We have that guidance. We always have that health or that help or connection, if we'll but ask or connect or work. Cayce says there's no skip steps, so we do the work. He mentions that even we meditate 10 minutes a day, 10 to 15 minutes a day is better than nothing. He says even 1 minute a day of meditation would make a big difference. So those qualities of figuring out we are spiritual, mental, and physical are important for our growth. We're not just, like I said, physical beings. We have these three components, and unfortunately, again, the elite have forgotten. Our job is to inspire in some way that they gain or gather this kind for their benefit. They're human too. They're our brothers and sisters as well. So we want to see and then utilize the highest ways to make these changes that we need on the planet.
But for question for you,
please.
This is one of the most interesting things. Cayce is known in the tabloids as for his predictions, which is actually just not truthful at all.
Correct.
Predictions, he did do predictions, but a tiny fraction of his work were predictions. And the greater message was what you hold in your head and in your heart determines your future. But the future is not set. And yet at the same time, there are things that are set in motion that you can predict, because like a ball rolling down a hill, you see it. But like with your work, do you get predictions, and are they hard and fast? How do you
always? Always. What I found is I've done over 50,000 readings myself professionally. And they call me the celebrity psychic, the psychic. Half the calls will be from other psychics. And I do the work in service or divine service. I actually see and hear the person's guide / guardian angel. It used to freak me out at first, but I kept demanding proof. I'd go, yeah, it's someone's life proof. And all of a sudden it would happen. I'm thinking, oh my goodness. But I learned years ago, don't edit what they say. They actually, they put me in the person's body. I'll see it through that person's eyes, feel it as though we would physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally. They pull me out. They're showing me scenes for that person. And then they're talking and telling me stuff, but because I'm a hard and fast skeptic, I choose the tarot, the astrology, numerology, palmistry, graphology. I know all those sciences very well, but I only use them as a third point of reference. First and foremost, I use the God-given gift that I was given since childhood of being clairvoyant, clairaudient. In fact, all the clairs, I always say I'm all the clairs. But it is that use, and then I allow that person free will to apply the information or not. But what I've noticed in my skepticism, they will give me information. The guides will invariably about the world or people. And I will just sit back. I don't know these people. They're from referral from years and years. And so I sit back, I get letters from 20 years ago. It's amazing. I should have listened to you because this and this has happened, as you said. But on the big level in the world, everything that they have given me, I've sat back and watched, and scientists confirm, Sidney, every week. So I don't have to push it. I see it confirmed, and that's the key. And I believe that that's my heavy skepticism, the academia with the psychic ability. And so for 40 years, I've watched, and everything they've given me. So Cayce states certain things are destined and others are free will. So if you were going on a camping trip, you might want to go and say, and it's, how can I say, you take your tent, but you don't take a sleeping bag, and you lock the keys in the car. You're going to be rather cold that night. But if you prepare, you can sleep, you can get, like I said, not only your sleeping bag, take that, you can be warm and cozy. Even if you take an inflatable mattress, you can be even cozier. And you can remember to make sure your keys are in a second spot so you can find them, even if the door gets locked. That's preparation. But you have a greater and better experience that night camping than you would have by just not paying attention to your gut level intuition or that higher preparation. And so in life, Cayce says there are certain things that will happen. They're normal natural cycles on the planet, whether we're here or not. And I find that people and their fear take over. Well, fear is false evidence appearing as real. So we don't ever pay attention to that. Danger is something that's real. And there you prepare or prevent. Okay. And so that's what we're doing.
Do you find that where you are, physically on planet Earth,
Yep.
that affects your abilities? And also, do you find the direction, like Cayce would lay down in an east-west position to give a certain kind of reading,
Correct.
and north-south in another? He often needed to be near a large body of water.
I have to. I have always had to be by a large body of water. I have to. It's a need. But on top of that, the direction is important. And I just gave a lecture and a talk about that last week. And I just wondered, because I've always been California, I would always feel all of a sudden I lose balance sitting down. And I'd know that there was an earthquake within 24 to 40 hours. I could tell the intensity, the duration of the earthquake, if it was a long dizziness or a short spate of dizziness. And I thought, oh, there's going to be an earth. I realized it would always show. So that I didn't know at the time that there were people that were earth sentient or feeling of the earth. And then I mentioned it to somebody that thought, you're just getting dizzy spells. I thought, no. And I happened to the next day be guided to the polarization material that's in the Cayce work, that they found the north direction for one way to give physical readings, the south for the life readings. And I found that we all have this kind of barometer inside self. So we are connected to the earth herself. And as she's going through this beautiful cycle of great change, Cayce says she's been through this several times. She always does it a whole 360 on the planet, north to south, and she does it in quarter turns. And whether we're here or not, this is part of the earth cycle. And so we're right upon that. In every cycle, Cayce says 3 times in these cycles, human kind of catastrophe and disaster, humans were supposed to spiritualize the planet, and we failed. Cayce says they see and show that we finally do. We have those things happen, but we actually spiritualize the planet, and that's the key. So the trick is not to fear it. Prepare. Use your connection to the divine universe to use your intuition to know when to go, where to go. But on that note, I'd like to thank you for coming on today as our guest and taking your time with us during this time of great change for us in the world. But I'd like to offer you a mini reading if I could on the air, please. My real reading is about an hour long. I can't do it here, but for you, we'll cover one specific question. Sidney, they'll tell you the answer and all about that specific question. And again, you have free will to apply the information or not. I'll always use the tarot as a third point of reference only. But remember how I mentioned before, how I do it. I actually hear and see. While you're thinking of the question, I want the audience to remember that there are gradients of this awareness as being a psychic. It's different from mediumship. Psychic ability is quite different in the levels. There are kindergarten psychics, grammar school psychics, high school psychics, graduate and postgraduate. And I would be considered postgraduate, and I'm still working on those levels that Cayce showed us. But it's important that we utilize the information in the highest way. So it's not doing me any good if I get information about Sidney in my living room. It's for your benefit. So I'm here to share that. So something that I'll help you phrase the question if you need, Sidney.
So do you want me to tell you the question?
Yeah.
I would like to know a matter of timing.
Okay.
I'm about to unveil a new project,
Perfect.
and if this coming June is a good time to do it.
Okay, you're not asking me though, with love and respect. May I suggest you're addressing it non-verbally in your own way to God Creator, your guide, guardian angel, not me or you, because we're human. We use 2% of the brain and we think we all know everything. That's the problem. So what we're going to do is you're going to address that, and I want you to feel in your heart chakra, how good you feel about the project, what you wanted to achieve. You want to know, would it be best for the greatest, highest good of your soul to promote the project for June? Is that correct?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, don't worry about the world is doing right now. You're asking Divine Universe, God Creator, your guide. And I will shuffle as a third point of confirmation. And just think of the question, feel how happy it would make you. If you got the answer you wanted, there you go. And then you're going to just say, stop shuffling whenever you're ready for me to stop, please.
Okay.
All right. The people don't realize with the tarot, it should be used in the way you've heard me say God and the universe in the highest ways always, as it was originally intended. It was to open the pineal gland, or God's eye. And that was literally what we were supposed to utilize it. Each card in the tarot could be 25,000 different meanings. And it's for that particular person or the reader itself or the psychic themselves. And so I just use it as a third point of confirmation. Now it does show me, this is interesting. Okay, it's a maybe, and I won't leave you today with a maybe. That's just two. A maybe usually means you're not sure. The divine universe is saying, well, which one do you want? But it shows me, before I want to continue on this point, there will be a gentleman that will help you to benefit a new direction of doing so. But you yourself brought in this task of this ability to ask the divine universe for what you want and get it on the planet or have it manifest. It shows me you'll be utilizing this. And it shows me, Sidney, as a little boy, you yourself had your own personal connection to God Creator. Most kids are playing G.I. Joe, they don't care. But you had this strong connection. It shows, and you're going to reconnect that portion as we're supposed to. As adults, you know, at 13, we think we know everything. We kind of pull it out, but it's supposed to be included in our business, our marketing, our work. We're supposed to pull this spiritual quality or center through. So I'm going to pull this up. I'm going to ask if, I'll do it this way so you have free will. If, ask it in that mind, if you choose to launch the project in June, would it be best for the greatest highest good of your career or soul? If you choose to launch it in June. Please think of that way as I shuffle. And then whenever you're ready, you're welcome to say stop.
Up.
Okay, they know, and then again, they control the tarot, not me or you. So what happens is, again, third point of confirmation only from what they're showing and telling me. And this way, the if allows you your free will choice, because your mind would be going back and forth. Should I, shouldn't I, will I, won't I? And again, that's that 2% of the brain that thought the world was flat for thousands of years. It's still a trend trying to come back now. But what happens is, oh, yes, if you choose to do that, I'm sorry, I'm excited. I really am everybody's favorite cheerleader. But not only is it an extreme, yes, goosebumps as I'm talking about this, it shows me it's your purpose, your path, your mission. Your soul knew this dynamic. It shows me God and the divine universe is sitting right on top of your head, and you're listening to that connection. You're also opening. The color royal blue would be a strong draw to you coming up, but you're opening up to that opportunity. It shows me, I'm sorry, it shows me excited for you. You're listening to your guide. Most people don't even, they live and die and have no clue that they're listening to the guide. The guide is always on their right side or directly in, how can I say, behind them and trying to embed information. It is not grandma, grandpa passed over. It's a highly evolved soul. You chose between you and the divine universe before you were born. I'm excited. I'm talking quickly. And it shows me not only that you have some sort of contract opportunity that will come from this, and you have even more guides down the line. They said fall, September, and then again, something about March coming up the following year that will conclude all this. It shows me several guides. So when you walk through a doorway, Sidney, when you see this door stay open, you look and there's nobody. There are a bunch saying, okay, Sidney, we're guiding you this way, that way. So your intuition will play. It shows me your soul has this ability it's going to be using between now and the next 3 weeks to the next 3 months, I hear. And it shows me to ask the divine universe for what you want to manifest and make it happen. It shows me you're going to be offered an opportunity or a job or position you're going to absolutely love, good pay with it as well, and the exact way you want it to be. But it shows me on the path of your head, the answer is yes. Now, people are going to try to talk you out of this. I don't care what they say. More millionaires were made during the last Great Depression than any other time of the last century. People forget that. not those on the inside track. They jumped out of windows. I'm talking about the ones that paid attention to their gut level intuition. Fatty Arbuckle was making $1 million a picture when people were holding a nickel to get in the theater that they've earned all week. So people have to understand this is not what the world is doing out here. We decide what your mission that you promised the divine universe. And it shows me this is what it impacts. So on the path where you're headed, the answer is yes. I want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity just to share. And I'm sorry about my excitement for you because it affects all of us. Thank you. I want to thank the audience. Please look into Sidney's work. I don't know where I got that from, maybe a past life name, but it does show me here in this lifetime, they need to look into Cayce's material by going to edgarcayce.org and looking up more detail, but please look at Sidney's book and read it with fervor. You got time now. Edgar Cayce, C-A-Y-C-E, an American prophet. Sidney, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Antonia.
And I want to wish the audience all the best.
Mother, grandma,